What's going on, Sales Hacker community? Thank you all for joining us today. So today we are diving into how B2B demand gen leaders grow demand without spending more money. That's the important thing. So essentially, how can you get more people talking about and wanting your product or service without dipping into, the old piggy bank? So I have two amazing marketers with me today, but before I introduce them, a few housekeeping matters. So number one, this will be recorded. So if you need to jump off, you want to share it out with a colleague, we got your back. We'll shoot it over to you via email once we wrap up. This webinar will be Q&A style. So I'll be grilling my two guests, but we want you to get super engaged as well. As you guys know, if you've been on one of these webinars, it is for you, the community. So get involved, mix it up, put these two to the test. Alrighty, so today, I'm lucky enough to be joined by Ellie Merman, CMO at Crayon, and David Gerhardt, the VP of Marketing over at Drift. Ellie, David, welcome.
Thank you so much for having us. This is going to be fun.
Hey, everybody. I'm excited to be here.
Fun to have you both. All right, so as always, I'd like to add just a little bit more color for context for the community. So Ellie, let's start with you. So Ellie Merman is the CMO over at Crayon, which is a market and competitive intelligence software company based out of Boston. So you're both based out of Boston. And prior to Crayon, you were the VP marketing at Toast. And you also spent many years over at HubSpot, which is really cool. And you were leading the inbound lead gen team over there. And if people want to find you, Ellie's on Twitter at Ellie.
Arguably the best Twitter handle out there, for the record.
Ellie. And if you want to learn more about Crayon, of course, go to crayon.com. Questions, we can answer any questions there. And then Mr. David Gerhardt. So, and I'm not kidding, this guy slides in about 10 seconds before this webinar starts. And he's going to rock it. So I don't think he needs much of an intro. You've probably seen him all over LinkedIn. He's a marketer, brand builder, podcast host, the mastermind behind Hypergrowth, which is a big event coming up next month. David, welcome.
Okay, so I was late because I was in a David cancel headlock, which is there's nothing you can do about it. So I was late, but I'm here now. Fun. So here's the funny story about Ellie and I is that we actually don't know each other that well. However, we both fall under, and this is going to make Mike really happy, but we both fall under the Mike Volpe coaching tree, which he loves to talk so much about. And we both learned from Mike at different times in our career. And so I think it's cool to be able to do this. And I just wanted to make sure that we gave Mike a shout out somewhere, because this just earns me more points with him now. So if I say something nice and shout him out, then I can go back and ask for more favors. Now he's not, even though he's not a CMO anymore, he dropped the M for the O and he's a CEO, but I just want to give him a quick shout. So
yeah, he always manages to find out about these shout outs too. I mentioned him in a podcast a couple of months ago, and he sent me a note about it. It's like, thanks for the shout out.
Or he'll do this, or he'll shout me out and then he'll text me, I shouted you out on that thing. Thank you.
Yep.
Anyway, Mike's always listening.
I'm excited to do this. It's fun to talk about marketing. When we've done this before, we talk a lot about sales. I'm excited to do this with another marketer.
Totally. Yeah. And as we all know, and we hear this from the community all the time, is the lines are getting so blurred, right? I think sales folks are getting really curious now about being more marketing centric and keeping up with what marketing's doing. And then vice versa, marketers are okay, how do I adopt more of a sales mentality? So I think these crossover webinars and conversations are a lot of fun. So, all right, let's dive right into it. I guess we'll do some warm up questions. All right, we won't go too hard. We won't grill you yet. But okay, let's talk about companies that you look up to. So you mentioned Mike. You mentioned HubSpot. What companies do you look up to, and who are your role models right now?
Sure. Should I kick us off?
Ellie, let's go.
I was gonna hopefully you go.
Buy some time. Yeah, I mean, there's so many amazing companies. I feel like we are in a fun era for marketing because it's just becoming a lot more data driven. There are a lot of companies that have really just expanded what marketing means. So some of the companies that I love following are the ones who do a lot of the data driven marketing approach. So doing lots of experimentation, really focusing on the data, not getting too wrapped up in it and really trying to be creative, but drive it based on, what's going to drive results. So of course, HubSpot does this all the time. We were talking about Unbounce before we jumped on, and think that they're great at that too. And then I also love companies who are trying to take a different approach. I think, on the branding side, I've been on the demand gen side for so long. I love seeing companies who are investing in branding, especially in B2B. Drift, obviously, a fantastic example of that. Just to see what it's like when it's not just about the numbers and trying to build up your exposure on that front.
Makes total sense. So looking at companies that are data driven, but as well, like focusing on the brand and creative and not forgetting that that's a huge part of it. Awesome. And Dave, over to you, my man.
So on the B2B company side, like I can't think of too many that I look at as role models, and that's not a knock. I just try to I'm just really interested in how people behave and how people think. And so I just find myself skewing a lot towards more towards like media companies and consumer brands and that type of stuff. But there's a couple of, CMOs that I've learned a lot. Like I usually try to find like the person behind the company, and you can learn a lot of stuff from that person. And so a couple people for me that I've been, following and look up to and learn a lot from is number one is Tim Kopp. He was the CMO of ExactTarget. I got to spend some time with him in Indianapolis a couple months ago, and he's become a friend and super helpful. And just learning what I love learning from people like that is that you realize that nothing that you're working on is new. Every problem has already happened, and it's oftentimes like less about what you learn from them and more about like it becomes therapeutic, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, they went through the same thing and he didn't know the answer either. And everything has already been written. Megan Eisenberg from MongoDB is another one. I don't know her personally, but I've seen her speak at SaaStr and watch a bunch of her talks on YouTube. And so learned a lot from them. But honestly, this is going to become corny and cliche, but Apple is my big one. And I think a lot of people say Apple, but they don't actually dig deep and study, what they do. And so I think Steve Jobs is the greatest marketer of all time. And just, if you go back and watch his product launch videos and all of his stuff that he's done at Apple back to the 80s is amazing. And so I think a lot of his stuff is still super powerful today. So that's the one for me, if I had to pick above anything else. But also, not to ramble, but there's a common thread between some of the most amazing CEOs, whether it's Jeff Bezos or Mark Benioff or Steve Jobs. Like, they are the best marketers oftentimes. And so I think if you look beyond marketing and study the people leading the companies, you can really learn a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's dive into that quickly, because I think that's interesting. So Steve Jobs, in your eyes, greatest marketer of all time. What are the top three things that make Steve Jobs the greatest marketer of all time in your eyes?
If I tell you them all, that'll give away a lot of my secrets.
All right, give us one or two.
I'll give you a couple. So number one is, like, to him, everything was about the story, and it's always a story. And I think that is true for everything. It doesn't matter if you're in sales, if you're in marketing, if you're in product management, if you're an engineer, if you're a designer, like, storytelling is everything. And if you go and study anything he's done, it's always a story. And everything he did is filled with analogies. The MacBook Pro is like blank. It's like everything was always some type of analogy, and people think in examples and analogies. And so he really, like, always told stories from that perspective. The other thing he did is just, they called it at Apple, and I don't know, I'm talking like I worked at Apple. I just read some books, right? They called it the simple stick, and Steve Jobs would beat you with the simple stick, which I think is the hardest thing that most people struggle with. I struggle with this every day, is to just simplify. And there's a great quote was like, I think it was like Thoreau said simplify. And then somebody said Steve Jobs' quote version of that would just be simplify. Right. So, like, there's always an opportunity to make things simpler. And that's, like, the biggest lesson that I've learned from him.
I love that. Those are all Awesome insights, takeaways. All right, let's we'll keep warming up. This one's going to get a little bit harder. So I want to pick your
Good.
brain.
Give it to Ellie. I would just talk about the fun stuff all day. Yeah, I love Steve Jobs. Like, this is
Yeah. So okay. So Ellie, what is the best lead gen campaign? Call it hack, call it whatever you want, or idea that you've ever had.
I'd say, I don't know if this falls into the hack category because I know this is going to be a classic strategy, classic tactic, but it always seems to work. It's figuring out what's on your prospect, your persona's mind, and solve that problem. And so, of course, it becomes very tactical, right? It's like taking a look at what keywords people are searching for, or doing interviews and figuring out what's top of mind for them, and just solve that problem. Like our top performing offer to this day is a competitive analysis template. Downloadable template, 50 plus slides, very tactical, and really came from doing that type of research. And it's like, oh, very clear. This is something people are searching for. We will create it. We will serve that demand, right? I know we're talking about demand gen, and part of that is creating demand where it wasn't there before. But there's going to be something that's in demand already in your market that is related to what you offer. And so try to fill that gap. It's a great way to catch the people who are already out there looking for you.
That's awesome. So you don't have to create these things from scratch all the time. There is already demand, and if you can locate it. So what's kind of one of your first steps then when you're going out and looking for demand? Like what's step number one?
I think, one of the things that I love doing whenever I join a company, and granted, full disclosure, I tend to join companies when they're pretty early on. So there's a lot of discovery still happening about the market. I love talking to people. It's one of the reasons I also love working in marketing tech, because then the people I'm talking to are other marketers. And it's going out there and talking to them and understanding what's their day job, or what does their day look like? What are their challenges? Having these open-ended conversations drives so much value for me. It's really a task of pulling me back from that to not spend all my time doing that. And I spent some time in user research, so I definitely leaned into it for part of my career. And so that's definitely playing a big role. And then I do a lot of content creation to help work out those ideas. I find that content creation, of course, it can help with your SEO, it can help with demand gen, it can help with so many different things in the company. But for me, it's also a process of figuring out how I want to articulate a story, like Dave's talking about. And so it's almost like it's good practice for kind of nailing down what is that story? How do we simplify it even more? How do we get at what people really care about? So I like that process of let's learn something, let's try it out, let's see if it has legs, and then building on that cycle.
I love it. And that's very much in line with Dave's kind of like simplify. If you're looking for demand, ask the market, create a story. And
I couldn't agree more than that. Like some of the best demand gen ideas that we've had come from like things that are organic, like a tweet that unexpectedly gets a ton of responses, or an email that we send out that unexpectedly gets a ton of responses. Like there's always kind of little things you can be doing to test like different channels where you don't have to put any budget behind it or like even think of it as a campaign. I think the best marketers are just like super creative. And I think like the last 10 years we've gone away from being really creative. And I think that's such an important skill, is like the mix of being creative and analytical, which I know is something that, we learned in the Mike Volpe School of Marketing for sure, is like, he's awesome at the being creative and analytical. But yeah, I think to Ellie's point, like talking to people, you can often get a sense, and this is going back to Steve Jobs thing, like they often didn't test a lot of things, right? I think you can get over test happy and want to test every single thing, and you don't often find a perfect answer. Whereas I think honestly, a lot of our most successful things, like campaign wise at Drift, we kind of just like had that random thought in the shower or at the gym and was like, oh, that'd be a great idea. Let's go do it. And I think it's just the marketers who win are the ones who can get to that channel the fastest oftentimes.
I like that. Yeah. So my takeaway from that is like, don't sit around testing and thinking too much, do a bunch. And then when you find something that works, then you double down and you triple down on that.
Yeah. I think a funny anecdote that comes to mind from my, elementary school days was that I definitely have a perfectionist streak in myself, and I think a lot of marketers do too. It took a long time to get over that. and kind of correct my behavior. Because one of the things, even from elementary school, a teacher would ask a question, I would think on it, wait for figuring out like exactly the right answer. And in the meantime, a dozen other students would raise their hands, get that answer in. So I was always, I was thinking about things. I was right there with them, but I wasn't raising my hand fast enough, and I was losing out on opportunities. I think the same exact thing happens in marketing. Like you're saying, it's oftentimes the first one there, and you need to get out there. You need to learn, and you just have to put yourself and your marketing out there.
What Ellie just said is so important. Like great marketers, like the skill, they're able to learn the fastest, right? And oftentimes learning the fastest means getting something out there. And a lot of people, I can't publish this blog post. It's not ready yet. Or I can't publish this video. It's not ready yet. We're like, you just got to go. Like, my boss, David, he always says that like, shipping, like you have to give oxygen to your ideas to know if they're actually any good. And so you and I can sit in a room and think we have a great campaign, but like I would just come up with a simple version and test it, because you gotta see what's actually out there and what's going to happen. And the best marketers are the ones who are able to learn the fastest. That doesn't mean you have to find the right answer, but I'd rather learn quickly and fail. And then, okay, great. We thought it was going to be these 3 options. It's not these 2. So we found the one. Like that's so important.
Yeah. And I thought that was such a great analogy. And I get it. You move quickly, break some shit along the way. Doesn't necessarily matter. I can't remember who said this, but I thought it was really smart. And it's like, while so many people are like seeking perfection, by the time you hit perfect, the market's moved on, right? And that thing that you thought was going to be, the next big thing is now old. So you just got to get to like good enough and just send it and then move on to the next thing. I love it. All right. Ellie, this one's going to go back at you. I'd love to get both your takes on this, but I would love if you just describe your company's overall demand gen strategy. I know it's a big, heavy question to tackle, so I'll let you take it which way you want to go.
Yeah, I'll give the high level answer more for context than anything else. We have a pretty healthy mix. I very much like to diversify our marketing efforts and our acquisition efforts, because the risk-averse side of me doesn't want to put all my eggs in one basket. And so we do both inbound and outbound. On the inbound side, we're doing a mix of organic and paid. Even within the organic, I break it out into more product-driven and more content-driven. So product being free products, free tools, and then on the content side, the traditional blog, ebooks, that sort of thing. Paid, the advertising, essentially. And then outbound, we're doing a fair bit. Of course, a lot of it is sales-driven, but marketing is supporting it. And I think that's really important. I think a lot of marketers get into a business and focus just on the marketing-driven deals, but then you cut yourself off from really solving for the company's bottom line. And so having that view of, in general, overall, what's driving acquisition and how can marketing support that is really important. And it can drive activities like we have a program within marketing that's kind of at the cross section between marketing and sales, where we're supporting outbound efforts using data in the form of content, essentially, to make outbound more effective. And so that's also kind of in our marketing mix and our demand gen mix, even though it falls under outbound, which is traditionally sales.
Yeah. Nice. And since we are our sales hacker, so I'll dive into that a little bit. So how are you then, keeping those lines of communication with your frontline sales folks? You guys have weekly meetings. Is there somewhere that they can, put all their information, then you create content around it? Is there, what does that look like?
Yeah, so we do a mix of some of the kind of ongoing natural, like organic conversations, walking over and talking to someone. And then we do have the regular scheduled meeting. So on a weekly basis, we get together as a marketing management team. So all the sales leadership and the marketing leadership gets together, and we talk about our numbers and what we're working on. And we have a lot of projects that we work on together. Yeah. And then we also get together as a broader management team on a monthly basis to talk about all of the different departments, so that we're all aligned and making sure that we're supporting each other. Great.
Awesome. And over to you, Dave. You want to give us a quick rundown on the demand gen strategy over at Drift?
The demand gen strategy for us is acquire every customer. I'm giggling, but kind of serious. We want to go fast. So, I mean, we use every channel, and I think you have to use every channel today as a marketer, because I just think about like me as a consumer. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Slack, email, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, webinars. Like, there's so many channels that we have to be everywhere. And so for us, like we try to be everywhere, and we can sell to a lot of businesses. Drift is a good fit for B2B companies with a sales team, and that really casts a wide net for us. So from a demand gen channel perspective, like that's we're everywhere. Events, PR, content, paid, all the channels. Like I actually, it's a tough question to answer because there isn't like one or two channels. I think the best demand gen people, teams, and everything today are able to figure out all the channels. The challenge is figuring out which channels you should be on and should care about, because it's also easy to be on 30 channels and think that 30 channels are important, where, most likely there's 2 or 3 channels that return have the best return on investment, and you should spend more time. But yeah, I think honestly our best demand gen channel, like to not talk about demand gen channels, is our brand. We do traditional demand gen, paid, SEO, all that stuff, but it's really been brand. And that's because there's so much noise and competition out there. And to think that we're going to win people's business by, optimizing our AdWords, landing pages better than anybody else is pretty tough. Like, that stuff makes a difference, but only to a certain point where, our big bet is that our brand is going to be our moat. Anybody can copy what we're doing. Anybody can copy our features. Anybody can copy our words, but they can't copy a brand, because a brand is how people feel about us. And so we're making a big investment in brand. And I think that's why you see us do a lot of the things that we do, is because that's the channel that we care about the most. And that's where we bet, demand gen is going, because demand gen is really freaking hard today, because we live in a world where people don't want to be sold to and they don't want to be marketed to. And yet people like Ellie and I have to lead teams and figure out a way to get people to buy from us and respond to our marketing. And so I think that's why we're really bullish on brand.
Makes complete sense. And then that kind of segues to my next question. There's, pay-per-click was massive, a few years back, and it was some people's like sole focus. Ellie, why can't you just pay for leads to come to you?
I'll give you the short version of the classic inbound answer. One is, if you stop paying for it, you don't get any more leads. The other part is that any channel, like Dave was saying, there's so much competition. Any channel that becomes popular becomes completely overwhelmed with everybody trying to outbid each other and really driving that price up. And so the effectiveness of any channel becomes less and less. And so you need to figure out a way to differentiate yourself. And so understanding what are the untapped channels can be really helpful. And you know what? It might be that AdWords is the untapped channel for your industry, but it's very likely, a whole host of other ways of reaching your potential audience. And so really, again, I'm a big fan of diversifying your marketing, because there's never going to be, in my mind, one thing that's going to work for you forever. Like, you think about something like AdWords or Facebook ads. I love the Facebook ads example because, for a very long time, companies were really just killing it on there. And then, at the drop of the hat, Facebook can change and then kill your entire marketing channel. So if you're overly invested in just one channel, it really puts you in a risky position, because you can be growing, and then all of a sudden the hose is turned off, and then you have nothing to support your future growth.
There's a great quote that I love from Andrew Chen, and I drew his chart. He calls it the law of shitty click-throughs. And basically it means that, like, over time, the longer you are on any channel, the least effective it's going to become. Right. And this is why, like, if you've done anything on Facebook, like, it's why, like, frequency, like the frequency of those ads is so important. Like, right around, there's like 5, like, whatever, I don't know the actual number, I'm just making it up, but like, if you can show an ad like 5 to 7 times to somebody, that's in the sweet spot. But once, if you've only shown it once or twice, it's not enough. But if you've shown it 10, 15, you start to, like, lose the effectiveness of that. So that part's really tough. But also, like, there's so many channels today. I love thinking about, like, think about the first person that did email marketing in like 2000, right? That person probably had a 90% open rate and an 80% click rate, right? Now we have marketers like high-fiving each other if they get a 20% open rate and 5% click-through rate. And that's just because there's so much noise. Everybody is using that channel. And I think the biggest mistake, you didn't ask for my advice, but I'm just going to give it anyway, which is like, I think marketers just rely too much on what a best practice is. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't follow them. Joe Chernov had a great saying, like, you would want your doctor to follow best practices, right? And I was, yes, for sure. But like marketers just kind of blindly follow best practices, where what happens is if Ellie said on this webinar right now that the best time to send an email was 2:00 on Tuesday, majority of marketers would then go all send their emails at 2:00 on Tuesday. And that would be too much noise in that channel, where Sunday night might be the best time to do it. So I think you have to find whatever, there is no magic bullet. You have to test a bunch of things, ship fast, and see what's going to work for your business and your channel.
I so agree with that comment. I was just talking about it. I was at a conference this morning, and that was one of the things we talked about, where this concept of a best practice is just what worked for someone else, and it worked for another person after that. And hey, that became the best practice. And then suddenly everybody's doing it, and it is no longer the optimal time for getting those response rates. On top of that, what works for one company is not going to be what works for another company. And so one of the classic examples in my mind is trade shows. So I grew up in the HubSpot world of inbound. I was like, trade shows are dead. Like you just have to cut your entire trade show budget, stop going to them. And then I go to Toast, which is in the restaurant tech space, and they ask me, so like, we're going to this trade show. How do we make the most out of it? Like, what's our campaign around it? And I say, why are we going to a trade show? We can't do that. We have to do this other thing. It's in the content world and whatnot. And but they'd already committed to a trade show. So when I joined, went to the trade show, saw we were getting tons of leads, and on top of that, they were highly qualified. And you fast forward a couple of years, the last year that I was there, we were doing 70 trade shows that year, because that was what worked for us, even though it was against the classic best practice.
That's like, you could just, if you just cut that clip, that's the best advice you could get. Where like that is how you know Ellie's a good marketer, because it's not the channel. Like, and the other thing is, she didn't just take the same playbook that she did at HubSpot and apply it to Toast and be like, and here's how we're going to grow. Like, and I think that's every 6 months, 12 months, year, whatever, whether you're going to a new company or within your own company, you have to always be evaluating, what channels are working. And, everybody's doing podcast. Everybody has a podcast right now. And I love podcasts. We have 7 of them at Drift, right? But like, that doesn't mean that you should go do one, right? Just because everyone else is doing it. I think that's awesome advice.
The timing too can play a role, right? At Crayon, we're much more similar to the HubSpot model of doing a lot of education, a lot of thought leadership. It's a new category for a lot of people. And but the tactics that we did in the early HubSpot days do not work for us, right? You think about 2007, 2006, around then, if you had a blog, that was already, you were golden. It was just like creating any content was just amazing. But now there's so much content out there. There's so much noise. You can't win on just creating content. It has to be a lot more than that. And again, email marketing was really big then. Email marketing, not a big player for us, not a big channel for us. And so you really need to try things out. Things change by industry. Things change by time. A year is a long time in the marketing world. So you have to validate it yourself.
I love it. I'm just letting you guys go back and forth there. This conversation's awesome. I love it. And I agree 100%. These best practices, you have to find the ones that work for you and are unique to you. And I would argue too that a lot of these best practices that marketers and sales folks have been using for years and years came at a time when like data wasn't as prevalent as it is today. So a lot were just like off of gut and like what other people were doing. And now we have so much more data to be like, okay, let's actually test this and see if it should still be a best practice. Okay, let's dive. Dave, I'm going to go at you with this one. So, from your experience, and this is around investments. So, how do investments in things like product marketing, brand, and content impact demand gen as a whole?
So there's a couple different ways. Number one is the one that's harder to measure, but you just know it. Which is, if your brand is strong, your sales reps will tell you that most of their calls, even if they don't close, will start with, oh yeah, I know who you guys are, right? And so a lot of people ask us like, you guys do so much with the podcast and video, like how do you measure ROI on that? And how do you do attribution for that? And our answer is always like, people tell us, they literally tell us like, hey, how'd you hear about us? Oh, I'm a big fan of the podcast. Like, so there's enough directional things that I think we feel really good about those channels being effective. I think we think of content, brand, PR, all that stuff as, basically the fuel for demand gen, right? If you are not good at content, my bet is you're not going to be very good at demand gen, because you might have someone who is super analytical and can set up all the right campaigns and all the targeting and all the tweaks and optimization. But if they're driving to terrible looking landing pages, or the ad copy looks just like everybody else, like those ads aren't going to work. And so I think those things all have to, play different instruments in a band together to work, where they got the best, like if I was a real demand gen nerd, like a PPC, SEO, paid specialist, I would want to go to a company that the brand was really strong, because I think that would make your life so much easier, as opposed to like me having to go sell, I don't know, like used cars or something, where the industry is really crowded. There's not a lot of innovation. There's not a lot of fun. I think they gotta work together like that. And I also think demand gen works the other way, which is if you're really good at content, and Ellie and her team were great at this back in the day at HubSpot. It's just like using paid to amplify what you're doing from a brand perspective. So promoting, using paid to promote your podcast, to promote your blog. I think those two things have to work, together as a two-way street with each other.
I'm so curious. I wonder if can I ask a question? I know that's not, I'm here to maybe answer questions.
Have you listened to me? I just interrupt this whole thing. I don't care what anybody asks.
Well, so obviously brand is a big priority for you, Dave. I'm curious about how do you integrate it into everybody's role? Do you hire people who are, specialists in it and that really lead the charge? Like how do you integrate that into the team, given that is such a priority?
So there's there's two teams that carry the brunt of the brand, which is brand marketing team, which is the channels in that team are content, PR, video, content, PR, social, and events. We consider those brand channels. For us, like content is not a direct response channel. It doesn't our industry is too crowded from an SEO perspective to be able to just blog and get leads from it. It doesn't work like that for us. So we invest in all those things as a moat to build our brand. And then we have a creative team, which is design and video, copywriting, that type of stuff. And so, that's a heavy portion of our marketing team. But also we just kind of have a couple, I think brand is everybody's job. And so we try to really, really articulate our market values and our marketing principles, which is like you talk, be real and authentic and human, always have faces and show your face and be a real person. And we don't use stock photos anymore. We only use pictures of people that work at Drift or our customers. And so there's little ingredients like that kind of like layer into any channel. And so if you're doing paid and you're running ads, the creative, even if you're, not on the brand team, the creative for those ads better not be a stock photo of some guy in a suit. It should be an iPhone style video of somebody at Drift talking about why you should use Drift. And so I think there's elements that we've built that's kind of like a cookbook that can be applied to any channel.
Nice. Yeah. Do you think that more companies are going to start to go that route?
I do, because I've already seen it on LinkedIn. Like when I first started doing all of those LinkedIn videos, people used to laugh and give me a hard time about it, which I love because I can take it. I have thick skin. But now everybody's doing that, and it doesn't make them good, right? And I think this is what's really important, which is just because everybody has a blog doesn't mean the blog is good. Just because everybody has a podcast doesn't mean the podcast is good. And so I like it because I think the more people have to expose themselves, not actually expose themselves, but the more people have to show themselves as a people, I think that really levels the playing field for authenticity and real companies to win, as opposed to being able to hide behind, marketing lingo. And it makes some people uncomfortable. But I also think that brand doesn't mean you have to shoot a selfie style video of you talking. That's just something that we've done. And that's how I like to promote what we're doing. I think there's lots of other channels in there, but I do think that the trend is that more people are having to be real, having to be authentic, having to be human. The era of no reply at drift.com has to go away. You have to really show yourself. So I think that is a big trend for sure. And by the way, Whenever I say that, the number one question like that usually comes up is like, yeah, but Dave, I'm in an industry where people don't, they don't do that. They don't buy into that. And I hear what they're saying, but I disagree because we're all people. And in our personal lives, we're all used to experiences like Amazon and like the Apple Store. And so maybe like the whole industry that you're in hasn't changed yet, but I think there's a huge opportunity to bring that to whatever industry you're in, because I'm not business Dave and then home Dave. I am Dave, the same person you would talk to right now on video. Like I'm the same, I promise you, like I'm the same person on this webinar as I would be if you ran into me at 9 o'clock having a drink with my wife and daughter tonight at a bar. And I think that's like what makes it easier. One of my favorite quotes is from Patagonia's founder, Yvon Chouinard. And he said, it's way easier to write nonfiction than it is to write fiction. And I think that's so true for marketing today.
Dropping the knowledge. I love that. It's an awesome quote. Okay. So this is great. I want to go quickly to the community here. We got some good questions. And I love this one. I know, Dave, this will be up your alley, and Ellie, excited to hear you. What are some books or resources you can recommend to learn more about different types of marketing? Ellie, we'll go with you first.
I prefer blogs. If it has to do with marketing tactics, I think that blogs are just going to be a better resource for getting things out while they're still relevant. I love books, especially for the more inspirational side. Like I just finished Rand Fishkin's book. Like super interesting to hear his kind of experience through the startup world. So I love books for that type of purpose, but for tactics, I think any company that has a big investment in marketing and is willing to share it, I think those are the ones that I'm most excited about. And those especially that have large audiences, because things get a lot more interesting when you have a large audience. But that also means that if someone like that blogs for some place like HBR, that can be really helpful, because there can be incredible marketers that don't work at marketing software companies, in which case they don't have an outlet for that type of kind of lessons learned.
Right.
So I love outlets like HBR for something like that, because it can be a good way to get a larger cross section to hear how people in different industries are tackling different problems.
Awesome. And Dave, favorite books, resources?
We'll give Ellie the question that says, drift install on website still not working, how to get help. You can answer that one after. Favorite books and resources. For me, resources, I hated reading. I never read my whole life. I didn't read in college or high school or anything. And now that I've gotten into marketing, I love reading, because I can see how I can apply that stuff to my job and like get better every day. And so I'm a big fan of reading, and I love what's really cool is reading books that were written 50, 100 years ago and seeing how those lessons are like still more true than ever today. And so I think there's just too much information out there. It can be really overwhelming. And so I try to find things that have like really stood the test of time and learn from them. And so I'm really interested in studying people. One of my favorite books though about marketing is it's called Behind the Cloud, the untold story of Salesforce or something like that. And it's, I read it almost once a year. I recommend it to everybody that I talk to that works in this industry. And it's Mark Benioff's book, the founder of Salesforce, their whole story about how they grew. It was probably written in 2008, 2007, 2008. And it's just awesome because you read that and you can see how many things are still applicable. So books are big for me. I've been more intentional about I've been struggling with podcasts lately because there's too many of them now, which is like hypocritical for me to say that because, host one, but I hope that ours is good and it stands out through the noise. But really digging into YouTube and just seeking out people that I want to learn from as opposed to trying to, go to a big site and try to find something. I want to, hey, it was really interesting. Like I learned a lot from Ellie today. Then I might go, deep and try to figure out like stuff she's written and stuff she's spoken on. And so I try to pick out like be intentional about people I'm trying to learn from.
It's a great way to do it. All right, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about, this is kind of the world we all play in. Talk a little bit about technology and how marketing technology can help you in your demand gen efforts and to help you grow your leads. Ellie, what kind of MarTech are you guys using and how has it helped you?
So we use, the classics, as I would call them, because basically I've used them at multiple companies at this point. But HubSpot, Salesforce, we use Drift too. We have some other kind of random things as well, but HubSpot and Salesforce are definitely our big ones internally. Plus all the freemium things like I even put some project management related tools in there, like Trello and even Google Docs. Like we're big users of that. And so I think about marketing technology as the thing that helps, that's in the background, right? It's not about, hey, how are we using this technology? It's, hey, what do we want to do? And how do we get rid of the things that can be automated, can be cleaner and easier so that we can actually do the creative part of our jobs? Because that's the part that, humans have to do. And if we can cut down on the automated, administrative side of things, if we can cut down on how, making one system talk to another because it's all integrated together, like that is where I think marketing technology and marketers need to find a way to work together, where it's how do we let technology be in the background to let humans really shine and do the things that humans do best.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's almost about making, the good marketers are going to rise to the top, and that the ones that rely too heavily on the tech to do their job are eventually just going to get replaced by that same tech, right? It actually allows you to be more human because you don't have to do the mundane tasks of everything in the background.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just to even rewind to when I first started at Crayon, we didn't really have any technology kind of infrastructure other than everything was homegrown because we had an incredible engineering team. And I was figuring out what systems to buy, mostly because I wanted to run marketing campaigns. I wanted to update content on our website, really basic things. I wanted to understand how people were coming to our website and how that was converting, like questions that I wanted to answer and tactics that I wanted to execute on. And I looked at HubSpot, and I also looked at a bunch of alternatives, and looking at marketing automation solution and looking at a CMS and making those talk together. And one of the things I decided, and it wasn't, even despite my experience with HubSpot, it wasn't an obvious choice up front until after I went through this process. I realized that because of my experience with HubSpot and because HubSpot had that all of those tools integrated, it was going to let me better use my time. At the time, it was really just me in marketing. So it would make it so that I could spend my time on things like content creation or campaigns or what have you, instead of, hooking up systems.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great way to look at technology kind of as a whole, whether it's MarTech, sales tech. And Dave, what's the secret sauce over at Drift? What's MarTech do you guys use?
It's kind of a loaded question because we basically run our entire business on Drift right now, but so there's not much other stuff that I can add. I'm just being honest. So that's what we're building. That's where we're going. So I mean, we don't have our website is WordPress, but other than that, our basically entire business is run on Drift. Only thing I would say about technology is I think that technology is like kind of table stakes now for marketers. It used to be like, technology was a way to get ahead, where I think now technology is table stakes. It's the language, it's what you got to be able to do. But I also think it's become table stakes for the end user, the customer. And so nobody is wowed or surprised by your personalized email anymore. Like that stuff is all table stakes. And I think that's good news for marketers, because I actually think it really does mean the marketers who can tell the best story and, bring out the best emotion and be the most urgent and convincing. Like, I think that's what's going to win, as opposed to like, this company won because they were able to, personalize their email and segment their list the best. I think that stuff is all coming back around, which is good, because it means that like, I can do what I'm good at, which is like getting people to the website and interested in Drift. And then our sales team can do what they're good at, which is they just want to get on the phone and sell. They don't want to do anything other than that. Then a good day for a sales rep is back-to-back call. You know how it is, Scott. Like, a good day for a rep is if you're on calls from 9 to 5, that's a happy sales rep.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's me going having a beer at 5 p.m. and loving life. Not
an unhappy sales rep is yelling at me, I have no meetings today. I don't even make eye contact.
Yeah. So, okay. So this is funny. We literally like just got a question before we dove into this. So this is perfect. So we got Adam Blythe, who wants to know, is there a time when you've had your marketing efforts attract a large number of leads that sales has deemed underqualified? So I'm big bad sales guys, like these are trash. Why are you sending me those? And if so, what type of insight were you able to pull from that experience? And I'm going to go with Dave just because he's smiling. He's got a lot to say.
This has never happened. Never happened to me. This is marketing and sales in a nutshell, right? The leads are never good enough, okay? And then on the other end, the sales reps are never following up with the leads fast enough. This is just like, this happens. It's every, and I think the only way this doesn't happen is if you have the same, you know, if you have some type of shared metric, which is, right, it can be meetings, it can be pipeline, it can be opportunities. I think this will always happen. Shout out to you, Adam. That's a great question. This will always happen if you don't have true alignment on your metrics, because, you know, I'm going to do what you measure me on. Right. And so if you measure me on website traffic, I'm going to own website traffic and not care about anything else. And that's just human behavior. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person, but that's just how we do it. And so as long as marketing is measured on leads and not what sales is measured on, which is opportunities, then there's going to be misalignment. I'm sure Ellie has had a bunch of experience with this too.
I totally agree on that alignment of the bottom line metric, because that solves all the problems. And I've actually been in a bunch of situations where my boss, you know, the CEO or whatever situation, has said, well, why should I measure you on revenue? Shouldn't I measure you on leads or MQLs? And I actually push back, because there are too many ways to game that. And it's going to create a misalignment. It's going to create it so that sales and marketing aren't on the same team. And yes, I understand that. I actually do believe in having two key KPIs for marketing at any given time. The bottom line one that matters the most, like revenue, but then something that's the early indicator of whether or not we're on track to hit that revenue goal. And that might be leads, it might be MQLs, might be opportunities. And that top line, that top of the funnel metric can actually change over time based on what you're seeing in terms of, well, we're having issues with the lead to operate, so let's really focus on op creation as the goal. It can help direct what that secondary metric is. But you need to be aligned on that bottom, kind of that end of the day, what matters to the business. So I think that can definitely play a big role. And when you're focused on the same thing, it clears up a lot of the conversation, or a lot of the discussion. One of the things I remind our sales team is that, you know, they could go outbound and pick and choose the exact companies and prospects that they want to talk to. Or we can do some inbound, whether instead or in conjunction. And you can't control who comes into you, right? You can't control who finds you and expresses interest. And the question is what you do with those inbound leads, and what you learn from that experience. So to get to Adam's original question of like getting this influx of leads that aren't deemed qualified, yeah, of course. But that the most recent example that comes to mind, we got a big promotion through a guest blog that did really well and drove thousands of leads. And we're like, ooh, this is cool. But I knew up front that actually it wasn't the right audience. And so I wasn't surprised when sales was saying, oh, these aren't qualified leads. I'm like, yeah, I know. But also, you know, it's just extra exposure. We ended up getting customers out of that promotion, even though it seemed like it was this noisy thing. We still got customers out of it. So
that's important too, because also like I wish I had a magic button that generated leads that only only converted at 40-50%. But like, you know, all leads are not equal. It doesn't mean that they're all bad. They just have different sales cycles, right? If you going to a webinar and eventually buying Drift is going to convert, is a different sales cycle than going to drift.com and requesting a demo. And you grow your business with a mix of all of them. It's just what mix are you, like if you're having people call webinar leads, like that's a different challenge than having people call demos.
Yeah. I think it's healthy to have those conversations of, all right, so we generate all these leads. You believe that X number or this type aren't qualified. What do we want to do about that? Do we want to withhold those leads from sales? Do we want to do certain nurturing? Or do we want to send them to sales and do something in parallel? I think that conversation is the important part of, all right, yeah, not everyone's going to be immediately qualified off the bat. What do we want to do about it with the ultimate goal of getting more customers out of these programs?
Definitely. And I would agree with you both that the only way to combat this is having KPIs that are shared, and then everyone knows what they're accountable for. Because I've seen so many horror stories. It's similar to you guys. As someone who's sold into marketing a long time, I've literally been in situations be like, oh, that campaign or whatever, like what did it amount to in like revenue? And get answers like, oh, it doesn't matter. Like we hit our lead goal. It's like, what? So that's like from a marketing side. And then also from like sales, seeing like sales write off whole campaigns because they followed up with 6 and it wasn't a good fit. So how you combat that is accountability.
It is tough though. Like you're definitely right to give them a hard time about that. But if that's what they're measured on, like that's what they're going to do. That's what they're going to do. And so, you can't give them a hard time if that's what they're measured on. Right. Like I think that's got to come from the CEO or the COO or whoever owns revenue. They got to have the teams focus on the right thing.
Yeah.
I think another interesting strategy there is if you really believe that a certain set of leads is qualified and sales just isn't following up or whatever the situation is, working at the micro level, right? A lot of times marketers are talking to a whole room of salespeople and saying, why aren't you doing this? And that just kind of falls on deaf ears. But if you can find someone in the sales team who is more inclined to try out different things, experiment a little bit, work with you to give feedback on a tighter turnaround, that can really help because you can get someone at the ground level to try something, prove out what works, and then be an example to others and saying, all right, I figured out this process. Let's, take this approach with following up with these leads because I've already, made a bunch of money doing this exact process. And that can really help. And, it's, I think it's particularly important as a company scales to have those allies in the sales team that can work at the ground level, right? A lot of times as you scale, you end up having sales leaders and marketing leaders working together, but it's really important to know the individual reps because you get so much great direct feedback when you're talking to someone who's, literally on the phone or talking to a prospect every single day.
I like that a lot.
One thing that one in the line of that, one of the most effective things that I've seen marketing people here do is literally just go sit next to a rep for an hour or two and just watch them go through their day. Literally log into Salesforce, go through their views. Oh, wait, why didn't you reach out to that lead? Oh, they're not very good. Wait, hold on, click on it again. Oh, interesting. Or wait, why'd you set, there's so much to learn by actually getting in the weeds and just sit next to one of the sales reps for an hour or so. You will learn more than you would in two weeks of looking at a spreadsheet.
It's it's another form of user testing, right? With user testing, you don't ask yes or no questions all the time. You ask open-ended questions and you observe and you see all the things that they don't think to tell you, right? Salespeople, you might have this impression that they love to complain, but the reality is they don't complain about half the things that are bothering them because they don't realize the things that can be fixed about their world. And so sitting down in that same process, right? Say they click on the views and you're wondering, wait, why didn't you use that other view? It's well, that view sounds like the same as this other one. Are they actually different? You uncover a lot of confusion of things that you could streamline for them so that they actually do the things that are going to be most impactful for them and for you.
That was gold and very actionable. If you're a demand gen marketer out there, don't just look at sales as sales. Look at them as individual reps and go spend some actual time with them. I like it. All right, let's keep the community questions going because we're getting some great ones. Michael Jaruska asks, what can a sales team do when they do not have a marketing team? If the sales team is tasked to drive all the marketing efforts on their own, where do you start?
LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I mean, I actually have no idea. It depends on your industry. That's the real answer. But I think if you have there's so many, if you don't have a marketing team, this is where technology can be amazing. There's so many tools that can help at least. So if you don't have a marketing team, you're gonna have to do the outreach yourself is basically what that comes down to. And there's so many tools that you can use today to find the right audience, whether it's Clearbit, whether it's Datanyze, whether it's ZoomInfo, Dun & Brad. There's a million tools like that. So if you can't if you don't have a marketing team, find a way to get some budget for a subscription to a data product like that. If you don't have a data product like that, just go hand to hand on LinkedIn and find the right people that you want and try to offer something valuable.
Totally. I would agree. So look, get a data tool, link that up. I would, make some hypothesis around, the segments and the personas that you're going to go after, bucket them, create messaging, like act as kind of like a marketing team would, but just do it on a smaller scale individually, and, you know, bucket them, make some messaging yourself, A/B test them, shoot that out, and then get a presence on LinkedIn and start adding some value for things that your customers or your prospects are going to care about. Don't do things you care about, do things that they are going to care about, and you're going to naturally start building this audience, and you can become your own demand gen channel. Takes time, but you can make it happen. Ellie, any thoughts on, from a sales perspective, how they can kick up a marketing engine themselves?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think one of the things that LinkedIn works about this is that it is a one-to-one, very personal connection. Otherwise, you don't want a disjointed marketing program, right? So say every single sales rep started their own blog. That's probably a little, not the best use of time. They're going to compete with each other. So really being selective about your time, or coordinating in some way about some campaign or event even, right? I think that one of the things that any team can do, whether it's salespeople trying to handle the marketing torch or even just a small marketing team, is to lean into what you do best. And so I would imagine that a sales rep is great with people. So set it up so that you have the opportunity to interact with people. And that might be a small group meetup in different cities, taking out prospects and customers to dinner or lunch or what have you, and try to facilitate whatever situation you excel in.
Love it. So true. All right, I've got this last question because I really like this question, and we'll finish with this one. And thank you everyone for the great engagement. We got some really thoughtful questions there. Okay, so we talk about how the buyer has all the power in today's B2B landscape. Comes up a lot. Have you made changes at Creana Drift to your marketing strategy to adjust to a modern buyer that really has endless information available, like at their fingertips, a quick Google search, and how does that impact your funnel? Ellie, let's start with you.
Sure. So a couple of things come to mind. One that you touched on just at the end there was that your marketing presence is a lot bigger than your website. And so you really need to keep that in mind, right? Anyone can find any sort of content about you, and the content that's not on your site can be more important than what you say about yourself. And so taking stock of what people are saying about you online and facilitating that content creation, whether it be, you know, encouraging customers to leave reviews, or working on a guest blogging program, whatever it is that just expands your footprint beyond your website, can really help with making sure that you have more of a say in the marketing or the customer experience that goes beyond your own website. The other thing that comes to mind is just allowing different ways for someone to, different paths, I guess, for a customer to come to you, because some customers don't want to talk to you, right? And they want to consume all the content, do all of their product research, and then sign up on their own. And creating a path that allows for that is definitely key. But then the flip of that too, I think that there's been a lot of conversation about that, and I think it is really important. But even the flip, so say you get someone who doesn't want to do that research, just wants to talk to someone, get quick answers, making yourself very accessible can be, with a phone number or chat, whatever, just a way for someone to reach out to you directly if they want to. And, you know, of course, everything in between, because different people want different things. And if you only have one way of engaging with you, you're going to be cutting yourself off from all of those other prospects.
That's a great point, for sure. So just giving them as many channels as humanly possible to get in touch or do it their way. Dave, any final thoughts?
I wasn't sure if you were trying to ice me out. No.
Never, my man. Never. All right. Cool. Well, I think that's an awesome place to wrap up. Ellie, Dave, this was a great conversation. Thank you so much for both your insight, and everyone who joined us. Thanks a lot for all the great questions. And I hope everyone has a fantastic week.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
See ya.